Hey guys, Johnny Crimps 2000 here. Welcome back to Capcom Arcade Classics Volume 1, my personal retrospective of some of Capcom's best arcade games. Today I'll be giving you guys a brief history of Captain Commando, and I'm not just talking about the game, but the character which has just as interesting a history as some of Capcom's top properties, one that goes way back to the early days of the NES. So who exactly is Captain Commando? Let's find out. Most of you may recognize Captain Commando as one of Capcom's representatives in some of their crossover titles, mainly Marvel vs. Capcom. A few more of you may even know that he starred in his own game, titled of course, Captain Commando. But for this retrospective, we have to start even further back, to the days when Nintendo was the new kid on the block and it was still socially acceptable for a man to wear a fanny pack while roller skating in really short shorts. That's right, we're starting in the 80s. Before Ryu was Capcom's premier representative in the Versus series, and before Mega Man became their most recognizable property, Capcom actually had an official mascot. This mascot came in the form of a space cowboy named Captain Commando, a product of Capcom USA used as their official spokesman. Nice touch by Capcom to incorporate their name into his creation. He debuted in 1986, initially appearing in the pages of several Nintendo instruction manuals for games that were part of the Captain Commando Challenge series. These included the likes of 1942, Commando, Mega Man, Ghost and Goblins, Trojan, Section Z, and Gunsmoke. Players would be greeted with a special message from the captain congratulating them for purchasing the game. His early design was vastly different from what he looks like now. For starters, he sported long silver hair, ray guns in each hand, and a medallion with 2 C's on them. He would be redesigned in 1989 to look more like a space pilot. Gone was the silver hair, the medallion, and the ray guns, and instead he was given an appearance that looked closer to the typical science fiction hero. He appeared with this updated look in the pages of the manuals for games like Strider, Mega Man 2, DuckTales, and Willow. Not content with advertising for other Capcom titles, Captain Commando was finally given the chance to star in his own game. Captain Commando the game was released in arcades in 1991. It was the 17th game released for the CPS-1 arcade board made by Capcom. It was a 2D beat-em-up game, as was the norm during the early 90s, but it had many qualities that helped it stand out from the rest, including a radically different setting and a cast of crazy characters. The game was a sort of homage to classic American science fiction novels and films, especially the works of science fiction Hall of Fame inductee Frank R. Paul, who was popular for his cover art in the science fiction magazine Amazing Stories, as well as for defining many staples in the genre. This influence could be seen in the setting and character design present in Captain Commando. For starters, Captain Commando himself was given a new design to fit in with the premise of the game. Instead of being just a space pilot, he was now presented as being a futuristic superhero complete with special gauntlets that allowed him to use both flame and electrical attacks. His hair was slicked back, and he was given his signature red captain goggles. Accompanying him were 3 new characters designed specifically for this game. First up was Gennady, or Mac the Knife in the English version, known as Mummy Commando, who is an alien from another planet who attacks with knives and spinning attacks. Next up was Sho, or Ginzu, known as Ninja Commando, who is actually a successor to the Bushin-Ryu fighting style whose best known practitioner is Guy from Final Fight. And last we have Hoover, or Babyhead, known as Baby Commando, who is a super genius baby who pilots and fights with the use of a mech of his own design. Collectively, all 4 are known as the Commando Team, the superhero protagonist in the game that the players take control of. Throughout the game, the Commando Team is tasked with taking down waves of science fiction-inspired enemies on their way to face the evil Scumicide, known in Japan as the more menacingly sounding Genocide. You travel through bright, colorful levels and face strange enemies. Bosses are even stranger and more memorable, from the Kabuki-inspired Yamato to the evil scientist Dr. TW, to the evil green monster, who just so happens to look like a certain cactus from another Capcom title. There is no doubt that Captain Commando stood out when it debuted in arcades. This was a beat-em-up title that wasn't just another street or medieval-themed brawler. Gameplay-wise, Captain Commando also delivered by being one of the few games in the genre at the time to allow for simultaneous 4-player action. 4 different players could select one of the 4 members of the Commando Team and play through the game together. Players were given the ability to run and perform special attacks specific to each character. The game also introduced the use of weapons that weren't typical in the genre. Due to its futuristic setting, players were given the chance to use not pipes, bottles, or swords, but ray guns, bazookas, and mechs. The mechs especially stood out due to their ability to take damage and for their unique attack abilities like punching, flame, and freezing attacks, a concept that would later appear in the Mega Man X series. Gamers were definitely not doing this in games like Double Dragon. Unfortunately for fans of Captain Commando, or beat-em-up games in general, the game was not ported to any home console until 4 years after its arcade release in 1995. It was ported to the Super Nintendo with some content being taken out due to space limitations. The biggest change was the inability to allow 4 players to play at once, even with the use of a Super Nintendo multi-tap. It was instead downgraded to a 2-player game. While the game was identical to the arcade version, the graphics took a slight hit, with colors not being as bright as the original. Some of the death animations were cut for being too violent, likely a consequence of Nintendo's censorship policy. The mechs were also completely taken out of this version, both as enemies and as ones that the player could ride. Weapons were less common, and there was some censorship with certain characters' appearances, including the female enemy Carol and Brenda becoming less scantily clad, similar to the treatment that Poison and Roxy received in Final Fight's Sega Cd Port. Despite these setbacks, the Super Nintendo version of Captain Commando was a worthwhile port, and the only one that American gamers got a chance to play at the time. Unfortunately, since it came late in the system's lifespan, it went largely unnoticed and not many people got the chance to play it. There was a Sega CD port of the game that was planned before the Super NES port, but this version was never released due to the system's failure. The game was also ported to the Sony PlayStation by New Inc. in 1998. This version was more faithful to the original arcade version and allowed up to 3 players to play at once with the use of a PlayStation multi-tap, with a 4-player mode made available through a cheat code. Unfortunately, this version only came out in Japan, and can also cost a bit of money off of eBay nowadays, with prices ranging over $100 for a copy of the game. It wouldn't be until 2006 when players were finally given a chance to properly experience the arcade version of Captain Commando. An emulated version was included in Capcom Classics Collection Remixed for the PlayStation Portable, as well as in Capcom Classics Collection Volume 2 for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. This version retained everything that was available in the original arcade version, and also featured unlockable tips, artwork, character profiles, and the chance to listen to the game's soundtrack. Apart from his own game, Captain Commando along with the Commando Team have also appeared in other Capcom games. The most obvious guest appearance was made in the Marvel vs. Capcom series, where Captain Commando was a selectable character in Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes, and the re-released compilation Marvel vs. Capcom Origins. Captain Commando appears in his updated look from his own game, and the rest of the Commando Team make appearances in some of his special and super moves. The Commando Team also appeared as playable characters in the Japan-exclusive Namco Cross Capcom, joined by enemies from his own game. They appeared as character cards in the SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighter series, made an appearance in Capcom World 2, and they appeared as a card in the Heroes and Heralds mode in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Captain Commando could also be found in the background of the Sentinel stage on a poster, along with other past selectable characters in a parody to the cover for Uncanny X-Men number 141. And lastly, Captain Commando and Sho made a cameo appearance on Ken's yacht during Elisa's birthday party in Street Fighter Alpha 2. It's also interesting to note that the American NES version of Section Z named the protagonist as Captain Commando, although this was only done by the English localization team and was not included in any other incarnation of the game. So what else can we expect from Captain Commando? Aside from his small appearance in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, he hasn't been in any new games, and there haven't been any plans to port Captain Commando over to the Virtual Console, Xbox Live, or PSN. Even a new updated version would be a great way to breathe life into the series, and then maybe we could get a next-gen Captain Commando game. Until then, fans have to go back to the arcade to enjoy the games that made Captain Commando such a memorable character. As long as we continue to do that, his shouts of Captain Corridor will live on in the memories of gamers forever. I hope you guys enjoyed this brief history of Captain Commando, and remember, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and leave a comment. If you want more from my Capcom Arcade Classics retrospective, be sure to subscribe to get them as they come out, and be sure to watch the rest of the videos in this series. This has been Johnny Crims 2000, and I'll see you in my next video.